people need to know, people need to understand, how this happens because I didn't understand. And it took until 10 years post, being trafficked for me to actually figure out I was trafficked. I didn't know.
Hello, and welcome back to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am your host, Nicolette Richer. Today's episode steps into territory we don't often cover on the Eat Real to Heal podcast, but it's a conversation we cannot look away from. I'm joined today by Alexandra Ford, a powerful advocate, TEDx speaker, and a mother whose lived experience reveals just how vulnerable children are to grooming and sex trafficking, right here in British Columbia and also around the world. Alexandra shares her story with clarity and courage as she breaks down the ways our justice system fails survivors, how easily grooming begins, often by someone familiar, and what real recovery can look like. This episode is not easy, but it's necessary, because protecting our children starts with understanding the truth. Alexandra Ford is a passionate advocate, speaker, and writer dedicated to empowering survivors of trauma and fostering a culture of consent. With a unique blend of academic expertise and lived experience, Alexandra brings a powerful and authentic voice to the critical conversations surrounding human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual assault. She holds a Master of Science degree in psychology, and Alexandra's other academic background is in criminology, victimology, and community and justice services, which provides her a solid foundation for all the advocacy work that she does. This expertise, coupled with her journey as a survivor, allows Alexandra to offer a nuanced understanding of the complexities of trauma and its impact on individuals and communities. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and please share with those that need to hear it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am really excited to welcome our new guest onto the show at the beginning of 2024 here. This is not a typical podcast that we would normally have on the Eat Real to Heal podcast, but I had to say yes to this interview for a number of different reasons, which we're going to get into in a hot minute here. But welcome to the show, Alexandra.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this is definitely a different style of podcast, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So I just want to start for everybody who is listening here. I know most of my listeners are here to learn about food as medicine, reversing chronic diseases using food as medicine. And instead, we're having Alexandra on the show to share with us her experience of being in the child sex trafficking. And is that, and Alexandra, I want you to jump in and I want you to correct me on every single term that I am using that's incorrect. I went through your Instagram and I loved every post because I was put in my place to say, okay, this is the language we use. You were very philosophical, very academic with everything that you were doing, and really raising important topics about semantics when we are discussing child sex trafficking, when we are discussing, and I want to jump into that as well. So please, I want you to be like, hit the gong, hold it right there, Nicolette. This is not what we talk, that's not the terms that we're using, because I think it's really important that we have people who are understanding this through a lens that is going to be not victimizing the individuals, but more building empowerment in this area. So, okay, so I'm giving you full permission.
Can do.
Awesome. I know you don't even need the permission because you're like a no holds bar individual who's going to set people straight on this, which I really do love. So I just appreciate you coming forward with your story as well. So one of the things, and child sex trafficking, is this the correct term?
Yep. So you can say child sex trafficking. Also, we use domestic minor sex trafficking because it is just a little more palatable than, having the word child and sex in a sentence.
Yeah.
Frankly. And Just to clarify for your listeners, I was trafficked when I was 20, so I wasn't a child when I was trafficked. So we're talking about trafficking in a more universal set, I guess, stance. Now, obviously, we do separate between children and adults, but both children and adults can be trafficked.
Right. Yeah. And I guess it depends. I'm in the fundraising space, and it's interesting because in the fundraising space, governments identify youth as between the ages like up to 29, even, or sometimes even it's,
Hmm.
33. And I think about that all the time. And so, yeah, so I like domestic minor sex trafficking. Um, and I don't like it. That's not what I meant. The term is what I'm
I
obviously
get you.
referring to. So you were 20 years old, and when I was looking through your Instagram, I was listening to other podcasts you've been on, interviews. You came from a very loving family, from what I understand. Like, you had a good relationship with your dad, from what I was able to garnish. Talk a little
Yeah.
bit more about that.
So one of the things, and the reason I share about my family is I think we have this idea about who ends up, I won't even just say trafficked, on the wrong side of the tracks, right? Whatever that necessarily brings up in your mind, but who ends up being a problem kid or something. And it's kids who have a rough start to life. Maybe they are in the foster system. Perhaps their parents are unable to care for them due to substance abuse issues or mental health issues. There's all these boxes that are sort of ticked, and then when you hear that person was trafficked or had a drug problem, you sort of go, well, the deck was stacked against you. The
Exactly.
deck was not stacked against me. I grew up in a quote unquote normal, boring, um, white middle class suburban neighborhood family. I am a first generation Canadian. Both my parents are immigrants from Europe. So there was sort of that, but my parents were together until I was in my late teens. I have an older brother whom I was really close with. On the surface, we really were that sort of picture perfect Canadian American dream. They literally filmed, if you know the movie The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, that, kind of speaks to those quintessentially perfect families or whatever. That was filmed around the corner from my house.
Right.
So it really was this sort of like snapshot of what you think of like the most boring, normal family could be.
Yeah.
So I always try and highlight that because it really helps to expand people's idea of like, who can this happen to?
No, exactly. And I've been reading a lot about this and finding that in a lot of cases, the individuals, whether they're children, whether they're young adults, they come from loving families. Now, I want to let everybody know the reason why I said yes to this podcast. And it's because a friend of mine said, Nikki, you need to binge watch this show that's on Netflix called Runaway. And it's filmed, I believe, in Quebec. It has subtitles, and I didn't know what the show was, but I have 3 daughters. So my friend called me and said, I'm watching it with my daughter. You should watch it and then decide if you want your daughters to watch it. And it is all about sex trafficking. And it's, and the character in the show, blonde, blue eyed, beautiful girl, loving, somewhat loving family. But lovely neighborhood, really good school, gets to travel, lots of freedom, and all of a sudden she ends up being in the sex trafficking world. And I watched this series like a hawk because I was like watching and I was like, wow, the psychological manipulation. And then I was seeing like
Yes.
how easy, and I want you to definitely talk about that. And then here's what happened. I finished watching. I probably stayed up to 3 in the morning watching this show. And the next morning, my 3 girls wake up and I'm like, girls, I need to talk to you about this because it wasn't a subject I'd ever brought up and thought about with my kids. And we
Mhm.
live in a lovely neighborhood in Whistler, BC. I just didn't even think about it. And so I tell my daughters this. They're like, whatever, mom. And, they don't want to listen to me. And they're just like, it's just a show. And I'm like, no, you need to watch it. And I open up my computer, and your publicist had just messaged me saying, I have this woman who was in the sex trafficking world and she wants to be on your podcast. So I took that as a sign and I'm like, let's do this. So that's how this all came to be, if my audience is wondering what's happening here. But I think it is so important And that's what I got from that show, the series. It's so important that every single human on the planet understands how this happens, understands the psychological manipulation that takes place, and that it can happen to anyone, even the
Yeah.
smartest of the smartest people out there. And so
Yes.
that's why I decided to do this. So tell us about, are you okay going back and telling us about how this all happened? How did you go from being in this lovely neighborhood, quintessential neighborhood, to you being in the sex trafficking ring?
Yeah. It's such a quintessential part of my story and why I am in the world where I share this and I relive it over and over again. People always ask like why are you willing to talk about it so much? And I think because people need to know, people need to understand, how this happens because I didn't understand. And it took until 10 years post, being trafficked for me to actually figure out I was trafficked. I didn't know. Um, so dialing it back a little bit, yes, great family, all of that. I was actually a child advocate, like super nerd. I'm pretty sure by age 11 or 12, I started advocacy work. I was, collecting signatures for a petition to send to the Canadian government, asking them to strengthen laws against child labor and exploitation. I was giving speeches at schools and stuff like that. Like my parents pretty much hung up their hats, I think, and thought, like we've won parenting, like she's parented, we're good. And fair. Like I was just I think the worst thing I ever did was stay up past bedtime with my light on so I could read more because I was just such a little nerd. Celebrate, I mean that in a very positive way. And when I was in my early teens, actually my best friend's uncle began sexually assaulting me.
Mm,
And that continued through my teens. And so while I kept up this front of still getting pretty good grades and still, please and thank you, participating in after school activities, I really started to it was eating me alive on the inside. And to manage that, I started doing drugs.
mhm,
The nerd in me had me doing drugs and like I would research them and be like, oh, this is dehydrating, so I have to drink this many milliliters, like I was doing it in possibly the nerdiest way that someone can, follow themselves down the wrong side of the tracks.
yeah,
But I still went down that side and I started dating the town drug dealer. And there's obviously a lot of details and nuance within that story, but from the sexual assault, and then that ended up in the criminal justice system, and I felt completely brutalized by our justice system because suddenly I wasn't in control of my story anymore, and I was getting calls saying, "You're going to court. Oh, no, wait, it's been delayed. Oh, now you have to repeat this to someone else's invasive questions," like, all of it, and I just spiraled out of control, so I ended up dating the town drug dealer, and so when he turned to me and said, "Hey, how about like what if we became business partners? What if you helped me make some money?"
mhm,
I was existing in this world that I had done everything right and someone had trespassed against me. And then I had gone to the police and then I felt more brutalized by that than I did by the original abuse. I kept feeling the way I felt was that I kept doing the right thing and getting the wrong like getting more hurt by doing the right thing. So when the wrong thing offered, you know, a flag saying like, "Hey, are you interested?" I was like, "Yeah, why not?"
yeah.
Because doing the right thing has gotten me nowhere to this point, and I'm still getting hurt. I feel disempowered. I both as a, human and as a woman and being made fun of by my peers and being called a slut, like all these things, it was just so overwhelming that it was like I tried the good girl thing, like that did not serve. Imma do the bad girl thing, because maybe I can get some power there. Maybe I will have some way to feel powerful.
And some
And
autonomy. And
sure.
and what you just described, yeah, I see this in every court case where a woman gets raped or sexually assaulted, and then it gets taken through the media, it gets taken through the court. The woman who is the one who was perpetrated, the one who had to go through the violence, go through the attack, go through the assault, now has to relive it every single day in court. then through the media. And then, of course, you have all the haters and the trollers and who are victim blaming, and then they're constantly. And so it's like, why would you even want to come forward and do that? The way our entire justice system is created, which really, if you look at it, was created by men to protect men. And so and
Mhm.
this is 2024, and there is no reprieve. I don't see any light at the end of that tunnel for women who are coming forward to talk about sexual abuse and rape and, sexual assault and domestic violence. Like it's not in the woman's favor.
Not at all. And I was a child, and I'm still being asked by the defense attorney, "Didn't you enjoy, you know, did the attention, and couldn't you have told someone something, and didn't weren't you dressing a certain way, and how many boyfriends did you have?" And, like, all of these things, like, all of the there was still so much blame put on a child. I was a
Yeah.
child when that happened.
Yeah.
And to also be basically told, like, "You were no longer a victim of this crime. You're a witness to a crime that was committed against the state or the province," right? Because it's R versus whatever. So you are now almost, it felt like you are property of the court system to tell a story about a crime he committed against their laws, not against my body. And so they're like, "You can say this, but don't say this. Talk about this, but don't tell about this." And I'm like, this is not even my story. Like, not only has all my autonomy and empowerment been taken away from the age of 13 to 18 by this man,
Yeah.
I now report to authorities and they're supposed to protect me. And they're telling me, "You're allowed to say this and don't say this, and you have to be here at this time. You have to answer these questions. You've been subpoenaed." Like, all of this, it was just this complete overwhelm of, like, another hit, another blow. And it just felt so disempowering. I don't have a better word for it.
It's
So
impact
I
for
was
sure.
seeking empowerment.
Yeah. And
And
and this is the thing for me. I was raped when I was 16. I had another sexual assault happen when I was 12. And I went to an authority figure, and they said, "I don't believe you. That didn't happen." And then they went to the person who did it and said, "Did this happen?" And the person said, "No, why would I do that to you?" So, and I only, in just last year in 2023, learned the term and understood what the term gaslighting was. It was a term that wouldn't register in my head for some reason until I realized. I was like, "Oh my gosh." I can't even imagine for me to go through that. And this is, two instances that we're talking about, but then to have that pretty much perpetuate itself through the court system as well. And I know for myself, like I was like, maybe it didn't happen. Like even to this day, I sometimes wonder, did that really happen?
oh,
Or
yes.
and the way I ended up dealing with it when I did get raped after that first gaslighting incident, I just said, well, you know what? I'm just never going to let that happen again. I'm just going to toughen up and I'll deal with this on my own. I'm not going to be the victim. But then, of course, I didn't process the trauma of it until just last year. So I
Mm.
can't even imagine, especially when it's going on for long periods of time, what that was like for you and for every other woman that this is happening to.
I think, oh goodness, there's so much there where I'm just like, "Oh, oh yes, that is so deeply entrenched in the problem with this idea of, like, you have to report." Even what you said, like, I'm no longer going to be the victim. Like, you're victim blaming yourself. Like, I need to toughen up. I need to do this. I remember when I first sought help, at, like, a rape crisis center, and I came in and I said, I've been a victim of sexual assault." And I remember, and they're so well-meaning, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about the people who work there, but they were like, "Oh, honey, you're not a victim, you're a survivor." And I was like, "What?" I just, like, for years when I was being assaulted by my friend's uncle, I told myself that I was in some sort of clandestine relationship with this, like, attractive older man. And even though I was 13 or 14, obviously he saw how worldly and mature I was.
Yeah.
So when it finally went to the police and it was like, "No, honey, like, that was childhood sexual abuse. Like, you were a victim." I was holding on to this word and, like, trying to make it fit because I had carried so much shame and self-blame for allowing it to happen, thinking, I should have, why didn't I fight? Like, sexual assault to me was someone fighting, a stranger in an alley, someone screaming no. Like, I hadn't done any of that, so it couldn't have been assault. So this idea of like taking the like I was just trying to get comfortable with that word victim, and before I was even comfortable with it, people are taking it away from me and telling me like, "No, you're a survivor." And then there felt like there was so much weight with that word survivor that anytime I did it wrong, like by going down past that, like the smart part of my brain was like, dating this guy is not a good idea. And I
Right.
was like, shut up, brain. Like we're
Exactly.
gonna do it.
Yeah.
But then there was like the other part of my brain that's like, you're supposed to be a survivor, and this is not what survivors do. So it just
Right.
like dumped shame on, which also made it impossible for me when I finally realized I was in too deep with that boyfriend
Yeah.
and it had gotten very violent. And I I was terrified, but I couldn't ask for help because I had walked into that relationship knowing he was a drug dealer, knowing he was violent, knowing I was making a wrong choice, and I thought everyone could see it. And therefore, if I turned around and said, "Help, I need help, like, this is too much. I'm in danger," the response would be like, "Yeah, well, come on. But you
You asked for it.
yeah, you asked for it.
You create your reality. But
Yeah, you made those choices." Yeah, but
yeah, but
I
it's that, and that's the thing when I hear, like, I am 100% with my girls. I'm like, you never call anybody a slut. You never call anybody a whore. You never put these labels on, because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? And who are you to what you're seeing at the surface level? I mean, it could be that somebody really just enjoys sex, really enjoys
Mhm,
it. It could be that they are truly a victim of sexual abuse that could have started at any age, or anything else that is happening. What we see on the surface is not what is truly happening behind the scenes.
mhm,
And we're so quick to
exactly.
judge, we're so quick to blame, we're so quick to think we're better than anybody else. But that's what that show Runaway really taught me, is that single one of us, any single one of us could end up in exactly the same position and not even realize that it happened.
Absolutely. Especially with I mean, similarly with grooming with sexual assault, um, but especially with traffickers, we know they're master manipulators. We know they're not going after, and I put this in quotation marks, but like the dumb kid, or they're going after somebody who has needs. And guess what? We're all human and we all have needs.
Exactly.
And needs for love, attention, um, focus, like all of that. Obviously, kids who come from some of those vulnerabilities I spoke about at the beginning, kids who are entrenched in the foster system, or their parents aren't available because they're struggling with mental health or substance abuse, or maybe none of those things, but they have a single parent, and their single parent is having to work several jobs, and childcare in this country and in a lot of countries is a struggle, or costs so much that it's not super helpful. um so you can have a kid from a perfectly good family who maybe their older sibling takes up more time because they're a star athlete, or their younger sibling takes up more time because they struggle with a disability or something, whatever it is. The best, most loving parents, and that doesn't mean that child isn't feeling like they still need somebody to pour into their cup. And guess what? It
Mhm.
it could be a predator.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes, is somebody pouring into your cup, and suddenly you're like, "Hey, I wanna be loved, I want attention, I want all of this." They don't often come in, you know, uh, gorilla pimp styles that we think of and snatching you off the street. That's not the typical. The typical is somebody you know, love, and trust, and they may have built that over complete falsities of a relationship, but that's the in, and that's how we have to start understanding it, because it can happen to anyone, because everyone has needs that can be
Exactly.
fulfilled by anyone.
And I read, my daughter did a paper in university, or not university, in high school, on sexual abuse amongst women. And I think one of the statistics is 99% of the time it's somebody that you know,
Mhm,
right? And so that person already knows the person. So they know their vulnerabilities, they know their desires, their needs, like whether it's for love, attention, or money, for example.
mhm,
And so they're there, like they are already calculating how they're going to do this. And it's somebody And in every single case for myself where there has been, a guy masturbating on the bus and telling me to look at him, and I looked at it and I was like, oh my, he's not a stranger. Like, he's a person in our community that I know.
Ugh.
And so it's just, um, I think we always think it's somebody else, like it's going to be a stranger, like don't talk to strangers, but it's actually like have your spidey senses up against the people that you do know immediately in and around you.
Absolutely. I think, and that was part of the thing that worked against me so much. And, it's just how when we know better, we can do better. But I had been taught that no means no.
Mhm.
And sexual assault was a stranger in an alleyway, and it was someone pinning you down while you fought valiantly for, survival. And that was not my experience at all. So it didn't like the first, with my friend's uncle, none of it tracked as sexual assault to me because it wasn't a stranger. I wasn't screaming no or fighting valiantly. Like, there was no explanation that if you're 13 and he's 30, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That is abuse. You are not old enough to understand what is happening.
Yeah.
And I also had all this messaging because I was such a precocious child advocate that you're so smart, you're so mature beyond your age, you have so much more intelligence, or you're like, score higher on IQ tests than everyone else. So it was like, okay, well, I would know this is abuse if it was abuse.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's not.
So what happened in that court case then? What happened to your friend's uncle?
We went through pretrial, 3 days of pretrial.
Mm.
Um, which none of us, I think, really registered was pre-trial. They definitely told us, but we weren't,
Yeah. It's all
super
brand
well
new.
versed with the justice system. I was on the stand, I think, for something like 11 hours total. It was insane. I had 2 panic attacks and had to be pulled off the stand and like taken for a walk to calm myself. Afterwards, they told us, well, that was pre-trial, so the judge will look over the evidence to see if there's enough evidence to go to full trial. And I remember thinking, this isn't over. Like, you've got to be kidding me. And so we were in pre-trial in May, and this was in 2005. We got a call in July. Sorry, we went to the police in May 2005. We were in court in May 2007. And in July 2007, we got a call that he had ended his life. And it was over.
Hmm.
That's how it all ended. So it was both this like
Hmm.
immediate sense of relief.
Yeah.
We don't have to go through this because he was a predator. He was also someone I loved. He was my friend's uncle. He was like an uncle to me. I didn't want to be the reason he
Yeah.
was in trouble or in jail or anything. But at the same time, I was angry and trying to process all of that. And I wanted closure of some kind. And I was expecting the justice system to give that to me, to tell me, yes, this happened. Because like you said earlier, I was questioning, like, did that happen? Am I
Yeah.
making that up? He's saying it didn't happen. No one else saw it. Did it like,
Yeah.
so yeah, he ended his life and it was just this abrupt, anticlimactic, find your own closure sort of moment.
Hi, it's Scott from Team Richer Health, and I'm super excited to share our team's 20-year vision. We will be building Canada's very first chronic disease reversal and mental health disorder reversal hotel and wellness center right here in the heart of the Cowichan Valley, British Columbia. This will be a state-of-the-art, 100% plant-based, integrative health facility, a place for education, healing, regenerative tourism, and sustainable community building. It's more than a wellness center. It's a mission designed to help people around the world reverse chronic disease, overcome anxiety and depression, and return to their families healthy and thriving. This project will also create meaningful work and a lasting impact within a local community charged up for this project. But grand visions require big support. That's why we're inviting passionate investors who believe in healing and global wellness to join us as founding partners in bringing this first of its kind project to life. We would love your support in helping us spread the word. And if you know someone who's passionate about creating real life impact and might be interested in investing, we would love to connect. You'll find all the details in the show notes, or you can reach out to us directly at richerhealth.ca. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this vision.
Wow. And it's so challenging. Like, as you know, as an adult, as a 48-year-old woman, I can barely make heads or tails of what's going on in my life. Like, did that really happen? Did this really happen? You know what I like? Everything in life seems to be a lot to process, and our perspective is changing on things every single day based on the information we acquire. But I was 16 working in a shoe store, and and one of my colleagues quit abruptly, who I worked at. I loved her. She was amazing, but she didn't tell me why she quit. She just quit. And I knew something was wrong. But then what happened is the store manager ended up turning his sexual advances on me the minute she left, and the stuff he would do. And I was 16 at the time, and I don't know what happened, but it was just a beautiful chain of events that all the big guys from Toronto were coming in to check on the stores in British Columbia, and they came up to me and they said, "Hey, how are things going?" And in that moment, I remember it being a very decisive moment where I could tell them what happened to me, but I didn't even know what happened to her. And so I just said, "Hey, can I just let you know?" And I remember saying, like, I don't know if this is bad or if he's really like being mean, or like I could, but anyway, I thought I would tell them. Well, they came in 20 minutes later with handcuffs and arrested him, and basically said he could never work for any of the chains of this particular brand ever again. But then I felt so guilty.
Mm-hmm.
He was about to have a baby, and but it turns out that he had been sexually assaulting the woman. She got compensated profusely financially for, everything. But again, it messes with your mind, that, and I was like, why am I feeling guilty for this predator, losing his job? And I mean, he's going to be able to go get another job somewhere else. But I think about that all the time. And if that chain
Mm-hmm.
of events hadn't happened with the guys in Toronto, would I have done it? Would I have picked up the phone call, or would I have just quit and silently moved away? Or who knows what would have happened? So it is so confusing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still confusing for me. I still have guilt. I still wonder about him and be like, oh my God, did it end his marriage? And, what happened to him? Did he take his life? Did he, who knows? But why do we carry that guilt?
Oh, that opens up the door to how so many women are socialized to ensure everyone around them is comfortable at the expense of their own comfort.
Exactly.
And I think that's something we are socialized towards from a very, very young age. Um, and it permeates our existence in so many ways. And as we get older, it becomes more and more prevalent, even to, you know, somebody offers to buy you a drink while you're out. And if you say no, they're like, oh, you're a bitch. And you're like, okay. And if I say yes and then walk away from you, I'm also a bitch. If I say thank you very much, that was interesting, just like a thumbs up thing. If I
No,
say
it does.
it does that automatically.
Yeah, it does.
But there's this like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't thing with, and oftentimes it's okay, well just tell someone you have a boyfriend even if you don't, because other men fear an imaginary man more than they respect you.
Yeah.
And it's just this idea of how can I mitigate the potential risk in this moment.
Mhm.
A, because I don't want to be victimized, whatever that moment is, and whatever that victimization, whether it's being yelled at or raped or murdered, like you don't want that. And B, if this progresses, how can I mitigate how I'm going to be blamed
Yeah.
if so if somebody, if this ends up in front of the police or something for whatever reason, and they say, well, he just offered to buy you a drink. Why didn't you just say yes and head back to your girlfriends? Why did you stand there and talk to him if he made you uncomfortable? Well,
Mhm.
because I was afraid to turn my back on him, or because I thought in the short term, if I placated, I could at least be boring or show my disinterest, and that would end it there. Like, it's worked in the past, so I thought it would work this time. How am I supposed to know this was a predator, like, not just your run of your mill, dick, it was actually like a predator or something. We are constantly trying to take in all the information around us and do risk assessments.
Mhm.
And we don't always get it right because we're human and we don't have all the information. We don't know who this person is and whether they're a predator or not. And we don't know, if our friends are going to stay or go, or like who's at the bus stop, and like all of that. And I think it just becomes super overwhelming. And then when something bad does happen, to whatever scale that is, there is that internalized, where did I go wrong?
Yeah.
When should I have set the boundary? Should it have been sooner, or would that have set him off sooner? Should I have just not gone out that night? Should I have just not worked at that store? Should I have quit when she quit? Like, and then there's this like, oh, is he okay? Blah, blah, blah. Like, because the narrative we hear in the media, you speak to some massive cases like Chantel Miller and Brock Turner, which was a massive case in the States. And Brock Turner raped Chantel Miller. Um, and he was reported, as a promising young swimmer whose athletic career had just been risked because of, her reporting. And it's like, no, no, not because of her reporting,
No,
because of what he did.
exactly. That's
That's
brutal.
where it is. So this is where, you started this out talking about semantics, like at the very beginning, and how important the language we use is. And that's where some people are like, oh my God, it's just a word, who cares? But it's how this gets reported, and how, when it gets reported, how it gets internalized in our communities, in our own heads, in our families, in media, all of that, like where blame is placed, who is part of the conversation, who isn't part of the conversation, who can be helpful, how to ensure that nobody feels so blamed they don't want to be part of the conversation. Like, there's so much there, I think, and it
So
it has to be picked apart.
it does. And I think so as I'm reflecting on, we've only touched a little bit on your story. I mean, a lot. That is a lot. That's enough, but here you are, you've now turned to drugs to cope, right? And to try and
Mhm.
manage these very complex emotions. Um, and probably to numb, which is one of the, coping around drugs, and so many other things I'm sure that you've reflected on. And then all of a sudden now your boyfriend is saying, hey, can we go become business partners? So at this moment, do you remember, um, was that when you said, yes, let's do this? And then you started down that road. Was there any point where you were like, okay, and I know you mentioned, asking for help, but then there's not really anybody that you can ask for help. What was happening in your life? What are your parents doing at this time? Do you have friends that are saying, don't do it? And how are you responding to that? Or was it almost like you were so far in that there was no coming back at that moment?
Those are great questions. My parents were at this point going through a divorce.
Mm.
Um, they My mom had moved out. I was living with her, but I was 20, so it wasn't, I didn't have a curfew or anything. It was an adult living with parent. My mom was traveling a fair amount. My dad was struggling, and I was trying to be there for him, but also just very angry at the world. So not, you know,
Mhm.
super connected. I was working a full-time job at a tanning salon, which is how I met that boyfriend. He came in, and I was partying a lot. So I had gone down this path, and had kind of developed a reputation of, you know, dating around, sleeping around, all of this. And so when I started dating this guy who had all of this clout, and he was like, you know, "Hey, do you wanna help me make money?" I was like, "There, that's what I'm looking for." Now
Yeah.
I'm not just the trophy on someone's arm. Now I'm a business partner. Like, now I'm helping on a more important level.
Yeah.
So at first I was like, "Absolutely." There was also this level of, like, trying to turn my sexuality into something that was mine and not something that was taken from me.
Right.
So I had no sense of what normal sexuality was because having been assaulted from, you know, early adolescence, I I didn't know where I was supposed to feel. So I just drummed it up in my head that like sex isn't that important. Like you guys are prudes. Like who cares if, by taking my top off, I'm helping distract people so my boyfriend can steal and we make money that way. Like, who cares? I'm in charge. I'm taking my top off. Like, I'm getting to decide what I'm doing and when and all of that. So for me, it was in the moment empowering. It certainly felt like it was. It felt like I was taking some power back. That was very short lived. Very short lived. My boyfriend was violent. When I first realized perhaps he was literally just as violent as everyone had suggested he was, and I'd seen some evidence of that. And I tried to break up with him. He showed me a newspaper article of a girl who had been brutally raped and thrown through a glass table and or just this horrific crime, and said that's what happened to the last girl who tried to break up with me. And I remember at that point having this sinking feeling of like, oh, I'm in too deep, or and also, all at once I can't ask for help. Everyone warned me about this guy.
Yeah.
Every single person. Even like he had a twin brother warned me about him. Everyone I knew and loved had warned me about him and said don't date him, and I had laughed in their faces. So who was I now to turn to them and be like, I need help because it turns out he's violent, right? I thought they would all be like, oh shit, we told you this. So rather than reach out and ask for help, which I now obviously know would have been the right choice, um, I just doubled down and I was like, no, no, no. Okay. I'm street smart. I've got a lot of attitude. People are scared. Some people are scared of me. Like I'm gonna figure this out. So I doubled down and I was like, oh, okay. Just kidding. Let's get a deeper buy-in with him. And then so when he's like, literally, we were at the strip club one day because we used to party there all the time. And all of a sudden, I feel my feet are no longer on the floor and I'm literally being deposited up on the stage. And the last thing I hear is him whispering to me, like, don't get down until you've made me some money. And there was this moment, like, this is what I want people to understand. I'm on stage at a strip club. There's no gun to my head. I was not in handcuffs. There was nothing, no gun pointed at me. There was people in the audience he didn't know. I could have stood there and screamed help, and the thought never even crossed my mind. The only thought that crossed my mind was, how can I please him? How can I do the thing that he wants me to do in the best possible way so I don't get hurt afterwards? Because the violence in our relationship was very present at that point. I had experienced not only witnessing it, but I'm being on the receiving end of it. And it was all about mitigating risk. If I asked for help, what if no one helped me? Now he knows I've asked for help. Like the beating that would have come from that, I couldn't fathom that. So it was like, okay, in this short amount of time, if I get up here and I do a little whatever and I come down with a fistful of money, no risk. I'm not going to get beaten up. That's what that's short term. I wasn't thinking anything beyond how do I survive this next moment. And
Just jumping in there about that, every business course, or self-help book or coaching course teaches that humans are always trying to avoid pain. And so we will just choose the least painful thing. So if public speaking is so painful for somebody, people will go and do something else, like to another human being would seem crazy. Like it's way more pain to do that, whatever it is, stay in that unhealthy relationship, or not start the business, or like make little money, versus all you have to do is get up on stage and speak and you could be a millionaire. But people will avoid that if the pain of public speaking is just more than this other pain. So like it makes sense that that would happen. And again, I keep coming back to that show Runaway for everybody to please watch it, because when I started learning about you and looking on I thought the show was actually on you. I thought you were the girl in the show, because every single thing you talked about on your talk about in your Instagram and your podcast literally is what happened to this girl. and exactly for every single moment, how she started dating the guy and then she fell in love with him. And then he would be violent one moment, but then, you know, basically telling her how much he needed her and how much he loved her. And you're watching all this happen and you're just like, oh my gosh. And from the outside looking in, you're like, why is she doing this? But then at the same time, as I watched the series, and even my daughters at first was like, why is she doing that? But then afterwards they're like, oh, I see how it's so manipulative. It's
Mhm.
preying on your emotions at the deepest level and your psychological state at the deepest level. But it is that constant, you know, running from one fear and one pain and being like, okay, well, this pain's not as bad as that. Like, I would rather probably dance up on stage and make a fistful of money instead of being, you know, beaten and thrown through a glass table like you described. So it makes
Mhm.
sense that you did that.
Yeah. And that is, I think I so appreciate that you brought that up because I think it is so easy for us to either go back on our own stories and judge.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we're not back in that position. We now have however many days, weeks, months, years of education, of experience, of healing, of everything, to be able to look back. Or we're looking at other people, you know, going through an experience and saying, like, why would you make that choice? That is clearly the wrong choice. But when you're in that moment making that choice,
Yeah.
you can't see anything. One of the best things I had a therapist tell me is like, you know, those what are the magic eye things? Like, or any photo, any literally any piece of paper, if you put it up to your nose, right? And you have it that close to your face, can you see what the big picture is? Can you see what you're looking at?
No.
So when you are in the depths of one of these, of any situation, but especially one that is fraught with manipulation and coercive control, trauma bonding, gaslighting, all of this, you have that, you can only see as far as that piece of paper pressed up to the tip of your nose, because that is survival. That is how far survival sees, is the tip of your nose. What is going to hurt the least in
Yeah.
this choice? And when you get away from it, suddenly this piece of paper, the relationship, you know, is over a distance from you, and you're able to look at it and go, oh my God, that was a mess.
Yeah.
I didn't even I didn't even see that. I didn't even track that that was how that happened. I
Yeah.
tracked that I'm an idiot who got on stage at a strip club. That's what I tracked in the moment. And then to go back and be like, "No, no, hold on. I didn't step up. I was okay." And that was a threat. Like, it didn't come across like that to me.
Oh, of course not. And on the flip side, with your family as well. Like, I have friends in their 40s who went through divorce, and it's not an easy time. And I see how self-absorbed, and rightly so, the parents are, because they're trying to now navigate a divorce and children and, you know, and everything and their emotions and everything. So it's exactly the same thing. That paper's pressed up against their nose as well. And it would be so quick and easy to judge the parents and be like, how come you didn't know this was happening to your daughter? You know, or your son, or that your son is the perpetrator, or that, you know, or the victim. We'll get into that as well.
Mhm.
But again, it's that paper's pressed up against their nose and they're not able to see the big picture as well. And it's so easy to, I can't even imagine, but I know, just again, reflecting on that docu-series, that it's after, when you look back and you see all the moments and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd done that differently. But in the moment, it's just, you can't. And because you're second guessing yourself and you're gaslighting yourself and you're like, no, that's not, my daughter's fine. And she's so smart,
Mhm.
or she's getting good grades in school, or she shows up for work on time. So she can't possibly have this altered life on the, you know, on the other side as well. Like, there's just, and yeah, and the manipulation is huge. The manipulation is
Mhm.
so huge that everybody is a victim of that.
Absolutely. The stories we tell ourselves, even when we have all the information. I'll share a quick story. I was literally okay, so I work in the anti-trafficking movement now.
Yeah.
Um, I dare say I would be considered, you know, an expert in this field, based both on my lived experience expertise as well as extensive academic expertise.
Right.
I know my situation. I understand trafficking. I teach people about trafficking, all of this. Okay. Literally this past weekend, I'm sharing a story about not this boyfriend, a different boyfriend I had. Because I've written a memoir and I was joking around about some of the stories that didn't even make it into the memoir that would probably be pretty major traumatic events for some people, but my Richter scale of what trauma is a little skewed. So I'm laughing that this didn't even make it into my memoir. And I'm talking about this boyfriend who left me at a casino as collateral without my knowledge. And the friend I'm talking to turns to me and is like, "That's trafficking." And I was like, "Wait, what? No, that was just him being an asshole." And he's like, "No, what do you think would have happened to you?" Like, he's like, "I'm assuming he came back for you." I'm like, "He did." He's like, "What do you think would have happened to you if he didn't come back to you? How do you provide value? They would have sold you."
Yeah.
So that right there, that's trafficking. And so me, however many years
Expert.
away out of this, paper far, far away from the tip of my nose. Not only that, but in between me and that paper is now 4 degrees, however many years of expertise, working in this field as an expert, training law enforcement, healthcare workers, all of this. And this, like, I'm recounting this story as sort of a haha, this is funny. And someone turns to me and goes, that was trafficking. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I had what? Like, I still, and as soon as he said it, it's like, of course it is. But until someone took that lens and hovered it over that particular incident like that, I never would have considered it that.
Oh my gosh, my mama heart just wants to hug you and love you up for all the things that you are doing out there to help people understand this and then there's this part of me where it's like, oh my gosh, like this fear center is creeping up to wondering, like, because the manipulation is so strong, because the psychological abuse around this manipulation is so strong, it's like, can we even prevent this from happening?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank
Yes.
you. Okay, thank
Oh
you.
my goodness, yes. That is okay, so
And even if you are the expert and you're just realizing that that was trafficking that moment, it's like, how do the rest of us, how as moms and as daughters and as sons and, community members, how do we support people?
I love that question, and I know this is such a scary topic, it's so dark, and I never want to leave someone or someone's listeners with this like, "Oh my god, I'm never leaving my house,
Yeah.
my children are not allowed on the internet, they're never leaving the house," like, that's not the point, right? It's not to isolate ourselves further. In fact, one of the best things we can do, in the world of prevention is to connect and to speak and to forge those connections and make sure we all sort of are willing to talk about this, even though it is a dark subject, even though it can be scary. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you can talk about trafficking or talk about things that can prevent trafficking without ever talking about trafficking. So the
Hmm.
things that prevent trafficking are things like having early and meaningful conversations about consent with your kids.
Hmm.
Um, and to expand on that, so I literally this past weekend did a TED talk on consent and why it's so important to talk about consent. Um, And when I'm saying that, it's not just teaching little girls how to say no. Like that is such a small nugget of it, and is that's where we end up with that victim blaming mentality we perpetrate upon ourselves and upon others because it's like, did you say no? Did you do the thing? We need to expand that conversation to not just how you can give or not give consent, but how you can receive consent, how you can graciously receive, like, not get consent, and what it looks like when it's not verbal. We need to teach our kids from a young age that somebody who isn't saying no, but their body is like tense and they're not really responding, their body is saying no to you. They may not know how to say no,
Right.
that could be for all level of things. Maybe they're have a parent or a sibling that's a bully at home. Maybe they're socialized in a culture where they're not allowed to speak their mind. Maybe they're just a very quiet, introverted human who doesn't want to upset anybody ever, but their body is telling you no. That is such an important conversation we can start with. And that conversation happens with boys and girls.
Yeah.
That is like, it is not just teaching, and I hate to genderize this because, of course, boys are assaulted as well. But it is not just teaching girls how not to get raped. And I'll actually take the gender out of it. It's not just teaching people how not to get raped or how not to get assaulted or how not to get exploited, how not to get trafficked. We also need to teach how you do not find yourself becoming part of a culture of predation.
Mm.
Why it starts with locker room talk, as we hear that term, and why that's not okay, because it's dehumanizing people. It is normalizing the dehumanization of people. How we can change subjects around, well, she went out and got drunk. What was she expecting to happen? Well, the natural consequence of drinking too much is a hangover.
Yeah.
It is not sexual assault.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure those conversations are happening in a right way where we're not victim blaming and perpetrating further victim blaming? There needs to be so much more research done on the path to predation, especially with trafficking, because we know someone isn't just born and starts trafficking someone, like 2-year-olds aren't trafficking someone, right? So they're more often than not groomed into the life as well.
Yeah.
So how do we nip that in the bud? How do we have those conversations? Well, that's making sure that we feel that we're teaching from a young age that selling other human beings is not okay and consent is necessary at all times with all things. Healthy relationships, healthy boundaries. These are all conversations we can have from such an early age, that we can create community safety nets. And the more conversations we have, the tighter those safety nets are. Beyond that is going to be online safety. We cannot have this conversation without talking about online safety. We spoke at the beginning of this podcast about the fact that it's not a stranger in an alleyway. The thing is, these days, it's not a stranger in an alleyway, it's a stranger online,
Yeah.
but they're not a stranger once they reach out and they get to know you and they chat you up and they tell you that their little sister goes to your school and that's how they know you and they've seen you around, so they do know you and they know so much about you, probably because you've posted a lot about yourself online, so they feel like a friend or a community member. So they could be a stranger, but by the time they flip the script and start, you know, exploiting or assaulting or wherever that is, get you to sneak out of your house, like wherever that is, they're no longer a stranger to you, right? They're someone you now feel you know, love, and trust. That's a
And that's
conversation that needs to happen as
the
well.
scary thing with Snapchat, because I'm just, as a mother of three girls who are 12, 16, and 19, and learning that you were 20 when you were trafficked. So
Mhm,
I'm looking at my 19-year-old who's like straight A student, and she travels and she's a photographer. Like, I'm like, I'm good. I got her to 19, but then now I'm like, there's 20 and there's 25, because I'm sure that adults get trafficked, right?
mhm.
It's not just young children, it's not just 20-year-olds. Um, and so, but the thing is with Snapchat, like, I'm learning there's so much we parents do not know about Snapchat. There's like this weird code, and if you use certain sayings, it means this, and they're dating and they're hooking up and they're, and meeting people. And it's like this, and most of the time they don't know who the person is, like you said, but technically they're a friend. So I'm trying to get my daughters to tell me more about this and going online to be like, what's this back end of Snapchat? We, like, parents just think that they're snapping faces pictures back and forth, but no, there's this whole other industry happening on the back end. um, and
Mhm.
and we need to have more conversations about that, and parents need to be having conversations, because I learned something from my daughter's friend's mom about Snapchat that I would never have found online on my own. So it's like, maybe we should be having monthly meetups. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I'd love to hear from you. Is that, we're talking about Oxycontin through the Community Services Society, but I didn't see anything on there about trafficking. And should this be on our local community sites? Like, who is going
Yes.
to be organizing these meetings? Like, is it up to the parents to do it?
Well, that's a great question. It probably will be. I spoke to a local person of authority here in Kamloops, and when I first moved here and said, "Hey, this is what I do, and I'm curious what's in place here and how I can
Hmm.
help and get involved. And the feedback I got back was, "Oh, we don't have an issue with human trafficking in Kamloops." And I was like, "Yes, you do. I promise you there is trafficking in every
Yes.
community, in every neighborhood, especially do you have it's not just like if you have a problem with housing and a problem with substance abuse, like that obviously can up vulnerabilities, but there is if there's online there can be trafficking.
Exactly.
So that's something to think about. Um, I think educating yourselves, ourselves as parents, the internet, is one of those things that I think so many parents is like, I don't even know where to start, so I'm just not gonna.
Yeah.
A lot of it, or I there's so much there that so often parents are like I get it. I mean I have kids, they're very young, so I'm like in the physical exhaustion rather than
Yeah.
the like emotional
Emotional.
exhaustion of
Yeah.
older kids, but um when you're exhausted as a parent, you do have to kind of prioritize and like, where can I put my energy and how much can I learn about a cell phone? And there's a new app every other day. And how can I learn about that? So it's definitely talking about that and getting some tips and tricks out there. You talked about Snapchat. Go check your kids' Snapchat because I think Facebook may have done it as well. You may have to check that. Location services. Snapchat has their baseline set up. If you do not turn it off, you are visible to anyone who has a Snapchat.
Yeah.
Anyone. And if you have your little avatar, then they can tell that you're a girl or you're a boy or whatever it is, and you are visible to literally everyone. So go, parents, please, if you're listening to this, go check your kids' apps and turn off the location services on them. There is no reason for them. If they're like, well, that's how my friends know where I am, text your friends.
Yeah.
You can, like, there's no reason someone who doesn't know you and doesn't have your phone number should know where you are.
No,
Bottom line.
exactly. And um oh my gosh, I like this really needs to be about a 12-hour interview because I have a million questions. Like even about your that first boyfriend who was the drug dealer and that he was a twin. And then how did one end up being like that? Did the other like I have that question. We don't need to go into that.
They're
Um
both drug dealers. They both did drugs.
oh, okay. So they're okay. So um so there's so many questions. There's questions on, I have it around clothing because now if you go into an Urban Outfitters, I remember walking in with my girls and I was like, why are we in a lingerie store? And they're
Mhm.
like, Mom, it's not lingerie, those are shirts. And
Mhm.
literally it was like bustiers that are see-through, all lace, and that's what all the kids are wearing. And then of course I'm finding, and I think I have some pretty good kids, like, just like you were and are. And but at the same time I'm like, you're wearing lace bustiers, and so do I like burn and slash them and say you can't go out, and stop posting pictures of that of you, like it's like. But then of course if I say anything, my kids are the first to say, Mom, you're body shaming, or you're, da da da, or so then it's, so this lends itself to a billion questions. And so in your memoir, because I haven't read it yet, I'm going to definitely get myself a copy. Do you teach about how parents communicate with their kids about this?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's not out yet, but I will send you a copy. When it is,
I will buy 100 of them, by the way. Yes, everyone's
I,
getting it for Christmas.
it's so I ended up doing, I tell my story and I tell it in detail and I tell it very much as you hear me conversationally with you now. So there's some sort of wry humor and like, oh my God, how did I find myself here and all of that. Um, What I am hoping to do is have sort of a book club, like a secondary little book club for those who want to nerd out on it, who those want to learn more about the trauma bonding, the grooming, the psychological impact, the coercive control, online safety, you know, all of those tips and tricks. People who want to read the book just because they want to read a book that's, I always say delving into Law and Order SVU, glass of wine, bathtub, and that's all they want. They don't want to go further. That's the book. And then I'm thinking, I've had a lot of like, can we learn more about this? So I'm thinking there's going to have to be like a secondary sort of booklet or downloadable PDF or something that answers some of those questions, because I get these questions from my friends, with their kids who are teenagers, young teenagers about clothes and stuff, like, how do I say, "Don't dress like that, you're asking for it," without saying, "What were you wearing?" to someone who was assaulted? Like, this is there's how do I have those conversations? And I think the biggest thing is, A, it's not one conversation, and B, it's talking about, like, delving into why are you wearing this kind of like,
Mhm.
what it does the attention feel good? Do you feel good in it? What about when you get whistled at? Ex we can work towards the world we want, where we can walk down the street wearing absolutely anything we want, and we will not be hooted at and hollered and all of this, but we have to exist in the world that we're in. So the world that we're in means if you wear that, walking down like the street somewhere, how are you gonna feel when you get whistled at or a car stops or people come up and talk to you? You have to understand your own choices. Look inwards. Why are you choosing to wear that? What kind of attention do you want? Does that feel good? If it does, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying look inwards and start having those conversations with yourself a little bit. Um, and we want to raise critical thinkers, not rote rule followers, right? Rote rule followers don't want to come forward when they make a mistake because we don't want to admit we made a mistake. We're not taught. So I think one of the biggest things that I do try and share with parents, obviously, if I like do a parent training, there's a lot more tangible tips and tricks. But is don't just have the conversation on what not to do and why they shouldn't do it and how to avoid it and all of that. Bring in the conversation of when you make a mistake, because you will.
Yeah.
You are human, you are a child, you are going to make mistakes. This is how I will be here for you. This
Mhm.
is how I will promise you that I will still love you. I will show you love. I will react. You will be safe telling me. Don't just have the don't do it conversation, because whether it's about getting in a car with a stranger or dating the town drug dealer or wearing the bustier or doing drugs or whatever it is, if all you ever talk about is don't do it, that's how we end up with kids who are stuck in these situations and choose the worst possible option of, even ending their life because they don't feel like there's another option because no one ever told them what happens after you make the mistake.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up spiraling so far down, is because I had no idea what happens after you make the mistake. All I could see was shame, and I better dig myself out of this. And guess what? When you're trying to dig yourself out of something, you dig down. You're not digging out. You need someone to reach down and help you out. You cannot dig yourself out of something without help.
Hey, beautiful humans. Scott here from Team Richer Health. Let's get real for a moment. We're living through a mental health crisis. Rates of anxiety, depression, and PTSD are higher than ever. And for so many people, the usual treatments just aren't working. That's why I want to talk to you about psychedelics. That's right, psychedelics. It's a hot topic right now, and honestly, I love that we're finally having this conversation. It's not about the party stories, it's not about the stigma, but the real evidence-based healing. For centuries, traditional cultures have used plant medicine to heal. Now science is catching up, with thousands of studies supporting that psychedelic therapy can help people with mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, and also those seeking deeper creativity, spiritual growth, resilience, and an overall well-being. That's all of us humans. Dr. Nicolette Richer is a certified psychedelic therapist, and she describes it as one of the most beautiful additions to her healing work. Over the years, she's had the privilege of guiding people through safe, ceremonial plant medicine sessions, and what she's witnessed is nothing short of profound. Talk about profound. I've experienced this firsthand, freedom from trauma that's held me hostage for years, finding laughter, peace, grace, and a life's purpose. Something I was yearning for decades. This isn't fringe anymore, it's real. It's happening, and it's raw and beautiful. And if you want to dip your toes into this universe, I recommend watching How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan on Netflix. It's a beautiful documentary that explores the history, the science, and real potential of psychedelics. If you're feeling the call and if you're curious but unsure, you can book a free consult with Dr. Nicolette Richer. Let's see if this might be the path forward for you. You'll find the link in the show notes, or you can contact us directly at richerhealth.ca. Thank you so much for listening.
So for all the parents out there, absolutely, there's so much intangible tricks. There's so much out there, and research it and have the conversations. But for the love of everything, have the conversation about when you make the mistake.
Mhm.
This is how I will show up for you. And I will. I promise you, no matter what the mistake is. Not you won't be in trouble,
Yeah.
not there won't be consequences.
Consequences. Yeah.
No, like we're not, this isn't a get out of jail free card, but this is a I will love you no matter what card.
Yeah.
Understand that. So hopefully there is some visualization of the path beyond a mistake.
Well, I love that as well because I don't know who taught it to me, or I'm sure I didn't come up with this on my own. But when my kids were really little, we gave them an imaginary stack of get out of jail free cards. And so it meant that no matter what you did, you can tell us, and we will not even respond for 24 hours. So I will not say, ask you a question. I will not tell you what it is. And so I hope my youngest doesn't hear this podcast because she's going to now know that, which like it's an unlimited supply of these cards, imaginary cards, but it's worked really well because she'll come up to me. My girls have come up to me and been like, Mom, I need to use one of these, cards. And I'll be like, okay, tell me. And they're like, you're not going to say anything? Nope, not going to say a single thing. I'm not even going to respond or react unless you tell me it's okay to start asking questions. And it has worked. And it
Wow.
is and I wish I knew who had taught me that as a parent when my kids were little, but it's sweet because it started off with, Mom, I drew on the wall to like, hey, Mom, I did mushrooms last week, so where we are now with like, one of my teens,
Hmm.
or I did something at school or I did, and it really does work when you create that space. Now I've messed up a lot as a parent, where I've been like, why did you do that? They weren't using one of those coupons at the time. So, but I do see how that works and how it's important, but also as a parent, we're never going to get it right all the time. That's like another thing. And we need to be having these conversations, I've realized, with other parents. So, something happened with one of my daughters recently, and the other parent was there to pretty much jump in to support these three girls, these three best friends that just, the kids make dumb decisions. But it was so beautiful to know that they were so lovingly held by this other family. And then the third family we had to go and tell, and but all of us together, we rallied together to say, no, like you guys are young, you're kids, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, and we love you. There's going to be consequences. Okay. But
Hmm.
and exactly what you said. But I feel so grateful to have these people in my life, the other parents as well. But then it made us realize we should have been having this conversation probably a few years ago, because
Yeah.
you always think that your kid's not into it right now, and then you're like, oh yeah, they're old enough to be into whatever it is that they can get into trouble with.
100%. I will say something I heard that was taught to me, and it's something I try and teach at all parent, trainings or anything like that is um just because you don't like want to talk to your kid about this right now doesn't mean they're not going to learn about it. It just means they're not going to learn about it from you.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to talk to your kid about sex yet, then they're still going to learn about sex. They're going to learn about sex from peers,
Yeah.
older siblings, and the bowels of the internet.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want that to be their foundation of understanding. You want you to create that foundation of understanding. So when other information comes in with the foundation of understanding you've created, hopefully it bounces that negative information away because they're like, oh, that doesn't work with what mom and dad taught me. That's not real. This doesn't, or hey, this questionable. I'm gonna have to ask mom and dad about that or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And the other thing is if you don't want to um again, not talking to your kids about something because you think it's going to destroy their innocence, I promise you, getting trafficked or assaulted or, having to dig themselves out of their own whatever holes they've dug by themselves, that will destroy their innocence 100 times more than having an open, honest, and collaborative conversation with a loving family member will. So
Yeah.
have the conversation. Always have the conversation.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and it just reminds me I need to have more conversations that I, just, I think, oh, I'll wait till next year, or, and there's no better time than now to have those conversations. So there is so much more to your story, and I want to respect your time, and I want to invite you back onto the show, because one thing I found from doing all of this research on that film, and then into sex trafficking, and then into your Instagram site, is priceless. I just have to say, like, every
Thank you.
post is just a wealth of information. It's coming from your experience, but it's coming from academia, it's coming from the field of psychology, sociology. Like, it's so beautifully presented. So I really just hope you continue to provide that information. So
Thank you.
where can people, until the next time we have you on the show, what are one of the first things that you would like people to do to get more information? Where should they go, and can they work with you?
Yeah, great questions. So you can follow me on Instagram at the Laughing Survivor. Um, with that, I mean, feel free to go through some of the people I follow as well, because you might find other really good resources. The Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking. That's a great resource to follow. They have a 1-800 number you can call and just ask questions if you're just like, hey, I heard this thing, I'm curious about it, or hey, I'm fearful that, my daughter might be in trouble or my son might be in trouble. So those are always good resources. Check your sources. If you do start kind of digging into the internet about trafficking, at this point, if you send me a DM, I do try and answer as many as I can. So please, if you have a specific question that comes up, I can't provide any sort of specific therapy. I'm not law enforcement or anything like that, but I can help redirect if there's something I can with. Um, and other than that, just ask questions. And if there's a survivor memoir, mine's not out yet, or I'd plug mine, but read those and follow other survivors and lived experience experts and learn more and watch that docu. I haven't even seen that docu series, so that's on my list to watch now. I gotta watch that.
I'm really curious about your feedback on that, and I would love to have you on the show again, that just to discuss that. I imagine it probably won't be, I know you've gone through, we haven't even touched into that, like the therapy, how you ended up getting out. That's a whole nother story that I want to be able to have our audience listen to, because I think it's going to be really important, valuable. Um, and how you are raising your children now. I think that in itself would be valuable. I know you have the TED Talk as well that will be coming out. When, or is it out?
Yeah, no, so we just had the event this past weekend in Surrey.
Okay.
And they have to edit the videos, and then it goes up through the TED Corporation. So I believe it'll be out in, I think they said March.
Okay,
So
great.
keep an eye, it will come out, and they
We
do a
will
great job.
we will
All the
share that.
sound effects were good.
And for nonprofit organizations that are out there, are there any that you can suggest, that if people want to donate their time or their money or their resources to, some that are, I don't know, better than others, or where they use the funds really?
That is I wish I had, a like choose this, not this
Right.
answer. I think there's a lot of nonprofits out there that are trying very hard to do good work. Some are more successful than others.
Mhm.
The Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking is really sort of a mother organization in Canada. So if your listeners are in Canada, they're a great one to reach out to. And you can even call and say, like, ask these questions. Is this somewhere, I should donate my money? Um, if you're American, I have a nonprofit that focuses on prevention and speaking to youth, and encouraging community members and parents and caregivers to have these conversations and build these safety nets. It's called Uprising. That's based out of Wyoming.
Amazing.
Um, so that I always can say, like, go check out Uprising. Actually, Uprising's website has resources for parents and kids over 12 if you want to start those conversations. They have YouTube videos and some great things to start talking about if you want to dive into some more resources. Um, and other than that, I don't want to necessarily at this point kind of like green light specific nonprofits. I do have some that I work with and I feel really strongly about, but I would start with Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I definitely want to land on this. When I asked you at the beginning, I said, what is the one piece that we want to make sure that you get across to all of our listeners out there? And please, for all our audience, share this podcast with everyone,
Hmm.
because everyone has a child somewhere. Everyone knows someone out there who needs this information. But you said trafficking is not just about the child. It's not just about the young woman. It's not just about it's really about it applies to everybody. Can you speak to that just a little bit more? Because I know this was the piece that it's important that we consider. We often just look at the person who's been trafficked, but we need to see the bigger picture.
And we touched on this a bit earlier, is it's not just about preventing victimization, it's also about preventing predation. And realistically, if we look at something that, we refer to as the trafficking triangle, so the three people involved in trafficking is the victim, the buyer, and the trafficker. And we know statistically 2/3 of that equation is statistically male. So this is not just a conversation to be having with women or our daughters. It is a conversation to be having with everyone. And it goes into a much bigger conversation about addressing demand for paid sex and how we can have those conversations in a non accusatory or shaming way with our boys. And what does it mean that you're just going to the strip club for some fun? How do you know that that girl on stage is up there by free will, is being treated well, is, not in a dangerous situation? Because no one would have known for me, right? I was up on that stage because I was trying to save my,
Life.
skin, my life, and no one would have known that. I had a smile pasted on my face. So I think being a little bit more discerning about understanding that commercialized sex in at this stage, and again, we can work towards a world we may want, but we have to exist in the world that we are in. And we know right now that the people who are selling sex, for the most part across Canada, are girls and women, are Black, Indigenous people of color, are people in poverty, are people who do not have access to higher education, who do not have access to childcare, who, started out with some of those more difficulties in life. We know that this representation means that it is an exploitative industry as it stands right now, and it exploits vulnerabilities, it exploits people who do not have other options. So we have to have those conversations. So we're teaching our boys that in good conscience, you should not be supporting an industry that preys on vulnerable populations.
Yeah.
So until we fix all those inequities,
Yeah.
we cannot in good conscience say this industry is safe or valuable or helpful or equal or non-exploitative. So have the conversation with everyone.
With everybody. Yeah, with everybody. I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I know I didn't get to tap into like 90% of the things that I want to, but even just what you offered was so invaluable. And I know this is a conversation that we're really just starting. I remember when they started talking about anorexia when I was in grade 9, and it was new. Parents are like, "Why are you talking about this in the school?" But it was it was something that was not discussed. And I feel the same with sex trafficking. It's not a topic that's often brought into the schools and addressed, but it definitely has made me rethink things that I want to bring to the school board and say, maybe we should be talking about this, and we probably should be. Yeah, so I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I know how much courage that takes. I know, yeah, when we have you on again, I definitely want to see what that path looked like for healing for you, and share that with people as well, so that people know that, you can come out the other side and reclaim your life as well. And yeah, and I want to let you speak to that on our next show. So I hope you'll be back.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to this important conversation with Alexandra. If today's episode stirred something in you, please allow yourself space to process. And remember, awareness is the first step towards prevention and change. I invite you to stay connected, stay informed, and continue shining light on the places that desperately need it. Together, we can build safer communities for all of our children. Join me next time as we return to the healing stories, tools, and conversation that support whole body wellness.